When I was 4 years old and grew fully conscious of my own physical image, I had the feeling that wherever I was, there would be an invisible camera filming me at all times. I believed that someday my own life would be played back to me as an unedited collection of uncut, raw footage. The awareness of this haunting spectre has always stood at the forefront of my film experiments and profoundly affects my artistic practice and theoretical studies still today. As an experimental filmmaker grasping at the underlying philosophical issues of a phenomenon that I am a part of, I engaged with film philosophy, media theory, and critical analysis in my questions about how a subject is affected or even created by the constant presence of surveillance cameras in urban spaces. Once I began my research, it became clear I needed to establish a relation between surveillance and the cinematographic apparatus that led to a deeper understanding of the specific medium of webcams. As I see it, the presence of online surveillance cameras contributes to the emergence of a constant cinematization of human experience. Here, the notion of the cinematic includes all that is linked to a widespread experience of cinema, an experience that is deeply linked to a previous knowledge of the medium-specific language of film. It is visible how the cinematic takes place in the city and affects people through multiple cameras and screens, but the cinematic also occurs beyond the presence of any optical equipment. By relying on BRUNO LATOUR's theories, I define the cinematic reality as a potential mode of existence. By highlighting the terms mode and existence, concentrates his focus on institutional entities interacting with the individuals and framing their actions. These institutions are to be regarded as beings, as non-human entities that directly interact with and affect humans. Initially belonging to the realm of law enforcement, surveillance has arguably become an autonomous institutional entity of its own, a being with remarkable effects and influence on subjectification. I am interested in the relation between post-PANOPTICISM and the attention economy. I therefore studied the contemporary condition of surveillance and its impact in the social realm by observing the collective experience of a world pervaded by audiovisual documentation, collection, and distribution. To further emphasize webcam's contribution to present-day systems of capital production with their continuous captures and streams, my study draws on Jonathan Bella's book, The Cinematic Mode of Production from 2006, and also The Message is Murder from 2017. I mainly engage with Bella's analysis of the contemporary heightened form of capitalism that has monopolized eyes and colonized synapses, and also how code is biased and operates under the specter of colonialism. The choice to use precarious archived visual material is a conscious political decision. This footage mainly consists of low-resolution imagery, often produced by deficient optics that are repeatedly copied, resulting in poor images full of glitches and noise. This visual material displays a precarious aesthetic, wherein the mode of operation of the medium itself is inscribed in the materiality of the imagery and is therefore inherent to it and not in line with neoliberal aesthetics. In the work I'm doing at the moment, my dual research of spectrality and haunted media of surveillance adopts a historical perspective to observe disparities and continuities between the first mechanical recordings of spectral apparitions in the 19th century analog genre of spirit photography and the contemporary digital video surveillance media that still create similar visuals. This is developed alongside a discourse analysis of media studies scholarship tackling the fact/fake-making potential of visual media, but also an engagement with philosophy, namely hauntology, to foreground aspects pertaining to the manifestation of ghostly visuals that may impact on social profiling. At the end of the 19th century, after spirit photography emerged, certain streams of both philosophy of science and rational thought embraced forms of knowledge production that could manifest and be employed outside of the realm of traditional scientific methods. The existence of phenomena beyond empiricist scientific methods of observation was acknowledged, and pursuit for its evidence was promoted. This supported the expansion of spirit photography, allegedly documenting the presence of ghosts and accepted as a demonstration of the facts of another world or the existence of invisible matter. Thomas Gunning draws attention to the ontology of ghosts as porous entities, not solid in their materiality and thus not entirely graspable. The presence of the spectre is somehow sensed, but one cannot prove it empirically by solely relying on the five senses. Andrea Ferris builds on Rosalind Krauss's thought by reminding us that the photograph as a mechanical medium allowed material reality to become intelligible. The trace left on the emulsion by an object's reflection brought about the belief that this constituted a demonstration of the existence of ghosts. The evidence that the photographic process could capture spectral imagery that could not be perceived by the human eye brought science and spiritualism together. Visualizing the presence of the dead on the plates made many believe they could communicate with past lives, since they were still manifestly present, both seen and captured by a mechanical process. Visualizing the presence of the dead on the plates made many believe they could communicate with past lives, since they were still manifestly present, both seen and captured by a mechanical process. These were European descendants, white men and women, leaving colored people out or having them represented as mediators between the living and the dead. Some Native American faces were used to symbolize the spirit world, but they were not portrayed as belonging to the material world of those being photographed. Positivism and metaphysics were brought together by spirit photography in the conception of the photograph as a factual document, between science and spiritualism, and not subject to empirical analysis. Fast forwarding almost 2 centuries to the present, with the notion of fact being in crisis, identifying the disparities and continuities between analog and digital documentation may add in challenging surveillance footage as the maker of operative images used as evidence. inspecting operative images produced by CCTV, I became aware of how similar these cameras' ghosts are to their analog counterparts. The appearance of ghosts in spirit photography is that of see-through humanoid shapes that seem to float within the frame. This is a form of representation that has its roots in literature and painting traditions and corresponds to what Keiken calls an iconography. This visual vocable refers to a sensory experience that transcends the five senses we rely on when engaging with the material world. When observing a photograph where the spectre is captured and rendered visible, an ontological event takes place that brings two conflicting worlds together and fixates them on light-sensitive emulsion. As Keiken writes, and I quote, "Spirit photographs portray a fissured space, one that allows visitors from another dimension to peek through, hovering within or beyond the space occupied by the normal figures." When comparing analog photography to CCTV imagery, what becomes immediately apparent is that the ghost has not changed in appearance in almost 200 years. One could say this owes to modes of light exposure, which are still very similar to those of early photography. In the specific case of this study, spectral imagery foregrounds surveillance technology as media and the image production implied by its mediation. As the already mentioned modes of exposure have not yet changed since the dawn of photography, CCTV cameras are calibrated to properly show the facial features of those with white skin, but also simultaneously blur identity-defining traces of all others. The direct consequence of such technologies is the creation of criminal subjects with darker skin tones, who will look very much alike when captured by these cameras. In contemporary video surveillance, the acts of observing, assembling, and transforming images of captured ghosts constitute a strategy for opening up the black box, where processes of image making paired with hidden power determining agendas are at play. This may help uncover the spectre of the medium itself, the ghost in the machine haunting all surveillance media, from webcams to drones. In Life in the Age of Drones, Lisa Parks and KAPLAN's introduction draws attention to the impact drone warfare has on race-determining perception and subjectification. MEREDITH MALONE defines the drone within the context of contemporary warfare as a vision machine that, and I quote, operates through images while also producing images that have the power to effect changes in modes of perception that determine our thoughts, feelings, and actions, end of quote. Their screens interact with humans during the strikes, and software algorithmically operates pattern recognition dictating conditions for and determining strike feasibility. As Malone further explains, and I quote, "Instead of merely representing things in the world, machines and the images they produce begin to do things in the world," end of quote. The drones are not mediating, but creating terrorist subjects by means of machine learning and their interface ruled by AI, with humans at both ends. If we are to agree with Jonathan Bella's claim that all code is at its root racist and sexist, the algorithms defining the computer imaging perceived by pilots and sensors should be considered as active tools in discriminatory practices.